Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So I'm still plugging away at this Junior here, and I've been doing pretty good work on it, but it's absolutely slow going, which is why I'm getting this episode out a little bit late for you this time, and I apologize for that, but I'm doing the finish repairs, and I had kind of a disaster on this one. The finish that I was applying to the side up here didn't stick, and I think it was just basically that craft paint does not stick to the primer that's on these Epiphone bodies, and I ended up having to switch to lacquer on that side, and coat after coat after coat, it's just hard to get the buildup that I need. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and polish this top for you so that you can see how I normally do that. You may have seen me do this before, but basically I sand down to 600 first, and then I come back with 1200, and it's a wet sand process. There's not a whole lot of mystery here. You just don't want to use so much water that it runs off into your wood areas of your guitar. You want it to stay on the finish. So what you can see here is that leaves you with a really cloudy finish, and to bring it back to the gloss you have to apply buffing compound and use a buffing wheel. I use a drill to do that, but you can do it on a much bigger buffing wheel if you have one. Now the buffing compound that I use is just regular old automotive buffing compound, and I use Meguiar's. You can use whatever brand you like. I'm going to use a heavy cut for this surface just because it's only sanded to 1200. I didn't go finer than that, and it would be hard to remove all the 1200 scratches with a light cut buffing compound. Now normally when I do this, I set up some barriers to keep some of that flying compound off of my clothes and off of the equipment that's on the bench. So that's what these are. And this process works better the faster that your drill can go. I always just keep the pedal down. Okay, now let me just show you what that looks like. So basically that's the half that I polished, and this is the half that I've yet to do. So you can see it really brings that original shine right back. Okay, well that's enough finish work for the time being, and I have a ton of that left, I promise you. That's part of what's been holding me up this week. But anyway, let's move on to the electronics, and I want to start planning out the pots for this, and I think I'm going to have to enlarge these holes because the Fleor pots that I'm using are similar size to CTS pots or any other imperial size pot. They're 3/8 inch shaft, so just as I suspected, they don't go through those holes. These holes are meant for thinner shaft metric pots. So we have to enlarge those holes, and usually what I use for that is a stepped drill bit, so that's what I'm going to be using this time. So the stepped drill bit helps me center things, and you can use a regular drill bit if you want, but the stepped one just seems to help me find the actual center of the hole and not drill them off center. Alright, and if the step drill bit doesn't go all the way through your body, and it didn't go all the way through mine, just use a longer 3/8 bit to finish the hole, and that will ensure you get the best of both worlds. And now that those holes have been enlarged, my pots drop in just fine. Okay, let's talk wiring for just a minute, and this is my wiring diagram. So as I always say, make yourself a wiring diagram before you get started with any project. You can print these off the internet. I like to recommend guitarelectronics.com quite often. They have wiring diagrams and they have humbucker colors as well. So this is for a Seymour Duncan, and I have decided that I'm going to try to integrate 2 mini switches into this guitar. One of them is going to operate as a series parallel switch, and the other one is going to operate as a coil tap. I did this on a Strat a while back, and I really liked the sound, and so I'm going to replicate it here again on this Junior. And these are the mini switches that I'm going to use. They're on-on switches, double pull, double throw, and it's not very complicated to get them in, but really the decision I have to make is where I'm going to locate these on the guitar. Other than that, it's a simple volume and tone knob and a single jack there, bridge ground, 1 capacitor. There's not a lot going on here, so I just make these kind of diagrams to give a visual reference while I'm wiring the guitar and just make sure there's no mistakes. Now, as I said, I really have to pick a spot to put these mini switches in. I could try to squeeze them in between the 2 knobs here. I might be able to fit them in that way, but I think I'm either going to have to extend the cavity so that it goes above or below the 2 existing knobs, or I try to locate the switches in a completely different spot, like up here where the normal Les Paul switches go. So I'm leaning towards this because I think I can take a drill bit and run it through the strap button all the way down to the humbucker cavity. As long as I can get a shielded wire from here to here for the signal, I think that might actually be the most ergonomic position and actually probably the best visual look as well. So I'm gonna have to contemplate that a little bit. I'll have to route this spot here or something, and I might even be able to use a standard Les Paul round switch cover, but we'll see. I'm gonna have to play around with it a little bit. Well, I made a decision on the switches, and I'm gonna locate them up here. And to do that, I did something a little bit risky, but it turned out pretty well. I took a piece of masking tape and I set it across the body here and drew a line from the strap button hole all the way down to the cavity. Basically a point in the cavity where I thought the wiring should come through. And then I took a small drill bit, made a pilot hole that started myself in the direction of this line that I wanted to travel. And then I took this really monstrous 1/4-inch drill bit that I bought for a Telecaster project once. Drilled a hole all the way down through, and I came out exactly where I wanted to come out, right here in this top corner of the cavity, right in the middle. Didn't come out too high, too low, it's just right. I'm really happy with the way that turned out, and now I've got to figure out how to make a cavity in this area that's going to catch that channel. Alright, so I eyeballed a decent location for these two switches, and it's basically where a traditional Les Paul switch would go. Now for this, I've kind of played around with the distances where I'd like to see the switches apart, and I've settled on 3/4 inches on center. So I've gone ahead and drawn a little bit of a template here. I've taken a center punch, and I have tapped out those starter positions, those sort of starter holes, pilot holes, or whatever you want to call them. Now I'm going to take a drill, start some holes here, and then I'll finish them up on the drill press. So I finished these two holes up on the drill press so that they went all the way through. And then I ended up going to the drill press. And originally there were two holes coming through the back in exactly the same spot as they were coming through on the front. And I used those two holes and a Forstner bit. That type of Forstner bit that has a point on the end of it, and I put the point in the starter hole that was left from the hole that was drilled from the front. And I made two large round holes. These are, I think, 3/4 inches across. And then I took a router and I just straightened the sides here. It was pretty simple actually, and now all I have to do is go in and make a little bit larger hole on top of this and put a plate over it to cover it. So something similar to what was done here in the original body. There's a little bit of a larger lip around this smaller hole on the inside. Okay, it's going to take me a little bit to get that cover worked out for that new control cavity on the back of the body. So I want to end the episode today with something that I think we ended the last episode with, which was working on this filled hole in the headstock. And now that this super glue is completely set up, the only thing left to do is to scrape the top off with a razor blade, and then I'll do a little bit of strip sanding on it to get it level, and then we can sand the whole face of the headstock and buff it just like we did the body. Okay, I've got that most of the way flush now, and now I'll just take a strip of 500 and I'm just going to run it along the face of that repair until it's absolutely level. And I'm just using light pressure with my finger here. Really close. Okay, now we're to the point where I can wet sand this with 600 on top, take just the last little bit of that little edge there off, get everything nice and smooth and ready for final buffing. Alright, and if you recall why I did that, I was filling that hole so that I could install a shorter truss rod cover and start a new hole for that top position. Alright, well thank you all for hanging out with me again. Again, I appreciate all the likes, all the comments, and I love the subscriptions. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see that next episode. Be sure to check out my Amazon links if you want to support the show, and I'll see you guys next time.